this computer. Okay, let me pull up the screen. Okay, so you guys are seeing the screen, right? You're seeing the Tanit Megillah,
Yes.
Megillah Talit. Okay, Masechet Tanit. Okay, good. So the first part, well, let's go through it a little quickly, just to say that a lot of times, again, an example of how much of this material was supposed to be learned orally, that we have a statement here that kibbutz, gaisut, tzedakah, maser, parnas, siman. The siman is a mnemonic or a sign. This is how you remember these 5 teachings of Rabbi Yochanan. Again, Rabbi Yochanan is he's a first generation, right? Is he first generation, second generation? I think he's second generation. He's in Palestine. He's in Amora, so he's a rabbi of the Talmudic period, and one of the leading scholars, if not the leading head of the academy. And he says he's going to these words are ways to remember his teaching. So the first one is that the day of rains is as great as the day of the ingathering is exiles. And play on words for the verse. Here, I change my glasses so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay. And the second teaching, so that's ingathering. That's kibbutz arayot, kibbutz galiot, and gaisut are armies, marauding armies. And the day of rains is as great as even armies stop fighting on it due to rain and mud. So that's and the play on words here is in the verse in Psalms, watering its ridges abundantly, settling down its furrows. Gidudeha and gidudim can also mean army units. So third one here is Rabbi Yochanan further said, rain is withheld only due to those who pledge charity in public, but do not give it. And then he's got a verse from Proverbs to prove that. So he has some teaching as to why rain is withheld or why it comes or how blessing it is. And then we get to this great story. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mai dichtiv aser ta'aser. That's from Deuteronomy. That again, the double infinitive here causes an emphasis that you definitely shall tithe. Is how you would translate it. Certainly you shall tithe. But he plays with it. He changes the sin to a shin. Aser bishvil titasher, and asher is to become is wealth. So is to become wealthy. Titasher. So aser bishvil titasher. So you should tithe. And eser comes from the word from eser, from 10, the number 10. So give a tithe in order that you should become enriched. Titasher. Now that we get to the story. Ashkechei Rabbi Yochanan lianoka the Reish Lakish. He came upon the son of Reish Lakish. Amarle ema li psukech. Basically, what verse are you learning? He wants to know, kind of like, are you doing your homework? What are you doing? Amarle aser to aser. Okay, so that's the verse that he's just interpreted. Amarle umay aser to aser. And then the boy says, what's the meaning? Or I guess probably like, what's the deeper meaning of aser to aser? You should surely tithe. And Amarle, umay aser to aser. Amarle aser b'shvil tit asher. So his answer, his uncle, this is his uncle, gives him the answer. Well, you should tithe in order to become wealthy. Amarle aser b'shvil shetit asher. Amarle menalach. So the son asks him, the boy asks him, how do you know this? How do you know that you'll become rich? Amarle zil naseh. Go test it out. Now, the boy is smart enough to know, wait a minute, is that okay? Can you do that? Umi share l'nesayu l'nasuye l'hakadosh baruch hu. Wait a minute, is it appropriate to test God, right? So, it's interesting because Rabbi Yochanan's response was not like, I derived it because of this way, or this is a good thing to do, or we should help the poor and then you become rich. He's like, go, this is a real live test. Go experiential, this is experiential learning. Go give a tenth of your income and you'll see that you become wealthy. V'akativ, and the boy says, though, that's not appropriate. Doesn't the Torah tell us, lo tinasu et Adonai? You shouldn't test God, right? Amarle, hachi amar Rabbi Yoshaya. So then his uncle responds, well, here's a teaching from Rabbi Yoshaya. Chutz mizo, in this one case, it's acceptable, shene'emar, because he has got a verse from the prophet Malachi. Haviu et kol ma'aser el beit ha'otzar, bring all of your tithes to the storehouse. He teref beveiti, and it shall be, what's teref? It shall be food. Okay, it shall be food in my house. Uvechanuni na bazot, and I will be gracious. Wait, that's not test. Bring the whole tithe into the storeroom, that there may be food in my house. Where does that say? Uvechanuni na bazot. Okay, I'm not sure where the translation is, but uvechanuni and be. I will be gracious in this. Amar Adonai Tzvaot, says the God of hosts. Imlo eftach lechem et arubot hashamayim, and see if I don't open up the. They have windows of heaven here. Okay, the stores of heaven. Beharikoti lechem bracha ad belidai, and I will empty them. I will empty bracha, blessing, without end. So it says here. I'm sorry. Wait, I translated. Uvechanuni is not chanuni. It's vachanu. Bachanu, livchon, is to test. It's a synonym for linasot. Right. So it says there'll be food if you give your tithe and test me, challenge me regarding this, says the Lord of hosts, if I don't respond properly. Okay, so there, Malachi, from the prophet Malachi, God is giving permission for you to test God in this way. And my ad belidai, what does it mean? Without end. Amar Rabbi Bar Chama Amar Rav ad sheyivlu siftotechem melomar dai, that your lips will be worn out from saying enough already. Oh my goodness, it's Trump's with, we're going to be sick of so much winning, right? Amar le ihavat mate hatam lahai psuka lo have tzricha lach ulahoshaya rabach. Now the kid said something pretty impudent. He says, if you had let me he's saying, if you had let me get to the place on my own, I would have figured it out, and I wouldn't have needed you or your Rabbi Hoshaya to explain it to me. Let's see, if I had arrived at.
It strikes me that's you can read that a little more gently. That namely, the kid is saying, if I had known this verse, I could have figured it out without help.
Right. Although
not if you had let me get to this place.
Well, the only thing is the idea that a child would say to his uncle, and we'll see in a moment that who was basically taking on the responsibility to raise him. So he's his teacher. And to respond, I wouldn't have needed you or Hoshaya, your rabbi. And it's a very disrespectful way to speak, especially, remember, this is a very hierarchical community. Your father, you're not allowed to disagree publicly when it comes to any kind of halachic decision with your rabbi, with your life teacher, your mentor. You can't do it while your mentor is still alive. So it's a community in which there's a tremendous respect of the authority of your teacher, and for him to say, I could have figured it out myself. I don't need you. I didn't need you, and wouldn't need your rabbi. It's kind of a disrespectful thing to say, which is odd. And then V'tu ashkache Rabbi Yochanan li'anoka deresh Lakish diateve amar ivelet adam tisalef darko ve'al aranai izaf libo. Now, so we have a second story of the precociousness of this child. So they're sitting and studying, and the verse comes up: the foolishness of man perverts his way, and his heart frets against the Lord. So the way Steinsaltz explains it is that when someone sins and every manner of mishap falls to him, he complains and wonders why these things are happening to him. He never figures out that it's, because of a sin. So Yatev Rabbi Yochanan v'ka matma. He was trying to figure this out. He's trying to figure out, because what he didn't understand was, he said, Mi'ika midi dichtive b'ktuve de la remize be'oraita. Is there anything that is written in the writings, in the section of the writings? This is from Proverbs, right? This is the third section of the Tanakh, the Ketuvim, the writings. So is there anything in that section that isn't alluded to in the Torah? Everything that's in the Torah, or everything that's in the Torah should allude to things that are in later texts. There should be this seamless connection. So they can't think of anything in the Torah that responds to this. So, but this young boy does. Amarle atu ha mila remizi v'hakativa yetze libam yecherdu ish el achiv lemor ma zot asa Elohim lanu. We just read this in the Torah portion. Is that to say the idea isn't alluded to in the Torah? But what about this verse from Genesis 42? Their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" That's when they've gone to Joseph. They don't know it's Joseph. They've gone and they come back with the food the first time, and one of the brothers opens up his pack and he says, "Oh my God, the money's still here, along with the food." And the guy just accused us of being a thief. We're going to be in so much trouble if we ever have to go back. What is God doing to us? Okay, so this is clearly what the verse in Proverbs is suggesting. So, Dal Einei v'chazabe. Now, he says, impressed by the youth's wisdom, Rabbi Yochanan raised his eyes and stared at the boy. I'm not so sure how he's staring at him. I mean, he could be staring at him like, wow, kid knows his stuff. Or he could be staring at him like, what's going on with this kid is a little bit too arrogant. He's a little too impudent. He's talking back to me. That he's raising his eyes in kind of a skeptical manner. Like, what's this kid all about? And then you notice Atya Ime Afikte. The mother comes in and whisks him away immediately. Amarale ta mikame de la le'avedlach kida'ava la'avuch. Come away from Rabbi Yochanan, your uncle, so that he does not do to you as he did to your father. And here Reish Lakish, Steinsaltz fills in the story of Reish Lakish. The boy's father died during a heated dispute with Rabbi Yochanan over a Torah matter. The argument ended with an offended look from Rabbi Yochanan, which caused Reish Lakish's death. And the boy's mother was afraid that her son might suffer the same thing. Now, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to stop. Let's go to that story. Now, I guess got to find it. What did I do with it? It is, let's see. Let's see. Let's see if I can, okay, share screen. Google. Okay. Are you guys seeing the Baba Metzia 84A?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a story in and of itself we could spend the whole day talking about, but we'll go through it quickly. So the Gemara relates, it's a story talking about the sages and their special qualities. Rabbi Yochanan happened to be a very handsome man, and acknowledged by everybody as being extremely handsome. One day, Rabbi Yochanan was bathing in the Jordan River. Reish Lakish saw him and jumped into the Jordan pursuing him. Reish Lakish happened to be a thief and a leader of a band of marauders. Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, "Your strength is fit for Torah study," and Reish Lakish said to him, "Your beauty is fit for women." We don't have to go into the whole sexual dynamics here, but obviously Reish Lakish either was ahead of his time as a pansexual, or he was just surprised because he saw Rabbi Yochanan was so good looking, he maybe thought he was a woman. Rabbi Yochanan gets out of this by saying to him, "Look, if you return to the pursuit of Torah, I will give you my sister in marriage, who is even more beautiful than I am." So Reish Lakish accepted upon himself to study Torah. Subsequently, Reish Lakish wanted to jump back out of the river to bring back his clothes, but he wasn't able to return as he had lost his physical strength as soon as he accepted the responsibility to study Torah upon himself. That also is a whole discussion as what does it mean once you become a Torah scholar, you become like a weenie guy, or is it that your strength is no longer for this physical way? I mean, in a sense, it's the rabbi saying that kind of strength, physical strength, is not as important as kind of your intellectual gifts. But okay, so Reish Lakish takes his Torah study very seriously, marries this beautiful sister of Rabbi Yochanan, and they studied together. And Reish Lakish, as we've seen him mentioned a number of times in our study, he becomes a great scholar. So Rabbi Yochanan was his main teacher. He taught him Bible, Mishnah, and he turned him into a great man. And he becomes one of the great scholars. One day, this is later on in their life history together, the sages of their study in the study hall are engaging in a dispute over, with regard to sword, the knife, the dagger, the spear, a hand sickle, a harvest sickle. When are they susceptible to ritual impurity? Something is susceptible to ritual impurity when it's completed. The Baraita answers, it's from the time of the completion of their manufacture. Okay. Question is, when is that completion? Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, who were study partners, studied together all the time, got into an argument. Rabbi Yochanan said it's from when one fires these items in the furnace. Reish Lakish said it's from when one scours them in water afterwards. Rabbi Yochanan, obviously they got into this argument. It must have been very heated. Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, "A bandit knows about his banditry." He brings up his past. You're right, you're not allowed to do that to somebody who's done tshuva. He brings up his past. Of course you'll know the answer because you're a lifetime of being a bandit. Reish Lakish responds very harshly to Rabbi Yochanan. "What benefit did you provide me by bringing me close to Torah? What good? Hey, I've become a Torah scholar and now you're attacking me for my scholarship and my knowledge from previous life. There, the bandits called me leader, and here I'm called a leader. So what good did you do me?" Rabbi Yochanan says, "So I provided benefit to you as I brought you close to God. Isn't that good enough?" Well, they both get offended. Chalash datei de Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan became weak and ill. Literally, chalash datei is his intellect weakened. Chalash Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish became ill. Rabbi Yochanan's sister, and clearly very, very ill to being sick, because Rabbi Yochanan, again, these are powerful guys, right? And if Rabbi Yochanan is offended, and we saw, if somebody gets offended, if a rabbi gets offended, you could be in danger if you're on the other end. And in this case, Reish Lakish became deathly ill because of his brother-in-law's being offended. His sister comes to him and crying, begging that he should pray for Reish Lakish's recovery. "Do this for the sake of my children," right? Here we get to the connection to our story, so that they should have a father. And he said to her, he quotes a verse from Jeremiah: "Leave your fatherless children, I will rear them." What about for me? And he quotes again, "Let your widows trust in me." Well, ultimately, Reish Lakish dies. Rabbi Yochanan was sorely pained over losing him. The rabbi said, who will go to calm Rabbi Yochanan's mind and comfort him over his loss? So they set up Rabbi Elazar ben Padat as his new study partner, but it didn't work out because Rabbi Elazar ben Padat was very obsequious to Rabbi Yochanan. Every time Rabbi Yochanan would say something, Rabbi Elazar said, "Oh, you're so smart. That's exactly the answer." And Rabbi Yochanan realized what he missed in Reish Lakish is that they argued with each other. It was the argument that he loved. And this is, of course, what caused the death of Reish Lakish because Rabbi Yochanan went too far. And then in the end, Rabbi Yochanan falls into tremendous mourning, loses his mind over his loss, and he dies out of a sense of mercy because he lost his mind. Okay. So that's the background story for this tale. Let's go back to our daf here. So what do you make of it? Well, how do you, let me just find it here. Tanit, yeah. What do you make of the, now that we know the background story about what was going on, and what do you think the rabbis are telling us in this tale?
Another going back to Torah study being it's a curse to be. Torah study can be a bad thing.
Yeah, it can be dangerous.
It can be dangerous. It leads to all these other things, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Anybody else? What do you think? What about the relationship of the boy? Does it give you any insight as to why the young son of Reish Lakish may have been at least in the stories, is painted as, being a little disrespectful? Or does it appear now, knowing that, does he seem to be disrespectful? Whereas Chuck had mentioned a moment ago that, you could read it as he was just, a very smart kid and letting his uncle know, hey, I can figure this stuff out myself. Does it change that reading, knowing the backstory?
I suppose it could, but since there's no there's no exact age or anything, I think it's pretty fair to say, we talk about with different, now we know more about learning patterns and stuff like that from people, and people that are either ahead or behind have disciplinary problems and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty. I'd say it's pretty fair to say that it might have very little to do with that relationship and just the general, well, just let me do it, let me figure it out.
Okay.
Sort of thing.
I'm focusing on the second, on the last paragraph there, that looking at it, it could be that Rabbi Yochanan was just so taken aback because it's almost like the reincarnation of his former study partner. And again, the mom comes in and takes him away, afraid that he's going to come to harm. So it's kind of like deja vu for Yochanan.
Yeah, and deja vu for the wife.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh, that's interesting that you say that, because I didn't think of it that way. But maybe he's like, wow, I've got somebody, I've got the reincarnation of my dear study partner that I lost, and the mother is also thinking like, I don't trust you. I'm taking him away, and I just think it speaks to the trauma, the continuing trauma, and that the rabbis in their development of these characters, because you have to assume that somebody wrote these stories down. I don't know how connected they are to reality, to actual history, but somebody wrote the stories down, and that they're cognizant of these characters that have been created in Talmud, that there's trauma here, I think. And at least for the mother, at least for the sister of Rabbi Yochanan, and she doesn't want the same thing to happen. Now, I think it's interesting that if you read the personality notes, that there's no necessary reason why we have to think this, but according to his notes, there's the assumption that the young man or the boy died at an early age because we don't find any mention of Reish Lakish's sons among the sages of the subsequent generation. Now, there's no reason why they have to be mentioned. Maybe they didn't become great Torah scholars, but I think it's an interesting thought that, oh my God, did Rabbi Yochanan do to the young boy what he did to his father? You know, is this some horrible tragic story of a rabbi who just can't stand being attacked? Or, you know, you could write a great tragic romance from these characters.
So Ruth Calderon, in her book, A Bride for...
Oh, did she touch on this?
A Bride for One Night. This story about Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is in there.
Uh-huh.
It's one of the stories she has, and she essentially has her elaborations, or maybe midrash on midrash,
Sure.
and interpretations. And I was just glancing at it quickly. I don't have time to reread the whole thing now.
I'll
But
have to go through it.
part of her interpretation is that Rabbi Yochanan had created a golem, like expanded into a Torah scholar.
Reish Lakish.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe this was the initial little fracture in Rabbi Yohanan's mental state, because later he goes insane.
Right.
So maybe this spooked him a lot.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Maybe this was right, exactly, that realizing his loss even more so, and especially when his sister takes him away, he begins to realize, oh my God, you know, this tragedy is never going to go away. I mean, it has consequences beyond the death of my partner.
I wonder if they're also, in telling these stories, if they aren't laying out some rules implicitly about how arguments should be conducted.
Very good. Absolutely. Right. That certainly in that story.
You don't want to go that far.
Right.
There's a certain arrogance in going that far.
Yes, there is, absolutely. And that's a lot of times what the rabbis criticize themselves for, is their own arrogance. It's pretty remarkable. Their ability to criticize themselves through these stories, that, these arguments can go too far. All right, so here let's go to the next story. So after we had this digression, we go to the fifth one, which is Parnas, and we have this interesting statement: Amar Rabbi Yochanan matar b'shvil yachid, parnasa b'shvil rabim. That he says that rain can come because of a single individual, like in response to the petition of a single person in need of rain. So farmer needs rain, and he prays, and God will respond to this one for this one farmer. But parnasa, when it comes to sustenance, greater, economic benefit, that one person can't ask for. It's got to be for the sake of the many. And we have and again, he always has his proof text. Yiftach Adonai lecha et otzaro hatov letet matar artsecha, that God will open for you, and it's the singular, lecha, to you, the individual, a good storehouse of treasure, to give rain upon your land, artsecha, you're the individual. But when it comes to parnasa, a greater amount of, here the word lechem, bread, sustenance. When it comes to sustenance, hineni mamtir lechem, this is plural you, for sustenance. So that's his proof text. But then they object. They have an objection, and they tell this longer midrash. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shlosha Parnasim Tovim Amdu Yisrael. There were three good sustainers. A Parnas would be like the head of the community in some medieval communities. or the collector, the person who would collect, like the well, kind of like the Federation person, not exactly a tax collector, but would collect money for the community to provide for everyone, provide for needs. So Shlosha Parnasim Tovim, there were 3 of these good Parnasim for Israel, Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam. V'shalosh matanot tovot nitnu al yadam. And there were 3 gifts that were given through each of them. Each of them had a relationship to a special gift. Be'er, a well of water, Anan, a protective cloud, and Mana. So Be'er b'zchut Miriam, the well was for the merit of Miriam. Amud Anan, this protective cloud, was the merit. It was due to the merit of Aaron, and Mana for the merit of Moshe. Meta Miriam nistalek habe'er. When Miriam died, the Be'er disappeared. Shne'emar v'tamot sham Miriam. The verse tells us v'tamot sham Miriam. And right afterwards, the verse says v'lo hayamayim la'eda v'chazra b'zchut shnehem. Now, before we get to then it returned. The water returned for the merit of both Moses and Aaron. So the people didn't really lose out. But the midrash that I'm familiar with, maybe it's not from the Talmud, maybe it's from a text, is that the well disappeared, and that's why they were having trouble with water. Now, there's nowhere in the Torah that anywhere that speaks of this magic well that's following them around. This is a midrash, and they derive it from the fact that when Miriam dies, they run out of water, and they put 2 and 2 together. But it is fascinating, as I pointed out in the notes, every time Miriam is mentioned in the Bible, there is something to do with water. Even that one case where she and Aaron complain about Moses getting all the attention as a prophet when they're prophets too, and then Miriam gets leprosy. Even there, you have a reference to water when God talks about, if the father spits in the daughter's face, doesn't she have to be, punished in some way? That is, if she's reprimanded, she should be punished. And so the idea of spitting in the face, well, that's water too. So, but all the other times you've got Miriam following Moses down the Nile, you've got her leading the singing at the splitting of the sea. So she's always connected to water, even though there's no reference to a miracle well. But we do have the reference that when she dies, right away they lose the water, and to invoke Ron Adelsman's name, he always likes to teach his connection with it was that Moses was so distraught at his sister's death that's the example in Numbers where he hits the rock and the water flows, where God had told him this time you were supposed to speak to the rock. And he hits it, and then God says, you didn't listen to me, and you've embarrassed me in front of the community, and therefore you and Aaron will never see the promised land. And that, anyway, it was Ron's understanding that he was so distraught, he wasn't thinking clearly. But in this case, it says that the water returns because this well returns because of the merit of Moses and Aaron. Then we go on to the clouds of glory. The special protective cloud disappears, and once again, they're connecting verses. There's nowhere really in the Torah that talks about because of Aaron they had these protective clouds, but we do have the juxtaposition of the verses where right after Aaron dies, when Moses and Eleazar bring him up to the mountaintop, and then they come down without Aaron because he's died. Eleazar takes over for his father as high priest. Right afterwards, we have this verse, Vayishma HaKanani Melech Arad, and they attack. The Canaanites attack after they heard. Well, what they hear, they heard that Aaron had died. And when Aaron died, the cloud of protection went away. And the verse Yeah, because the verse is that when the people see Moses and Eliezer returning down the mountain, it says, "Vayiru kol haida ki gava Aaron." They saw that he had died. And the interpretation here is, don't read Vayiru, they saw, but rather Vayira'u, they were exposed. They were seen. The people were exposed because the clouds went away. And here, we just talking about Reish Lakish. This is how Reish Lakish explained it. The Amar Reish Lakish, ki mishamesh ba'arba l'shon. This was a strange thing. I don't know why it's here, but they throw in Reish Lakish's explanation of the word ki, that in the Torah, and you see up here in the verse, the word ki can mean four things. And in this case, Vayiru kol ha'edah, the community saw, the community, they're again reading with Vayira'u, the community was seen, was exposed, ki, because Aaron died. That's how he's reading the verse. That's how he's reading ki here. Okay, so now according to the Midrash in the Talmud, Chazru shnehem b'zchut Moshe. So these two gifts, which were lost because of Moses, because of Aaron and Miriam's passing, came back because of Moses' merit. Meit Moshe nistalku kulan. Then all three of the gifts, because the manna also disappeared. When Moses dies and they enter with Joshua into the land of Israel, once they enter the land of Israel, that's when the manna stops. And then there's a verse in Zechariah, ve'achid et shloshet haroim b'yerech echad. In 1 month, the three shepherds died. These three good shepherds died. And Zechariah is not necessarily referring to the three of them, but that's how he's reading it. But wait a minute, they didn't all die in 1 month. Because Miriam died in Nisan, Aharon be'Av, and Moshe be'Adar, and died in Adar. They died in different months. But the gifts, the three gifts that were given because of these three great spiritual beings, all disappeared once Moses died. They all disappeared in the same month when Moses passed away. Alma Ashkechan. And now we get back. We had this little diversion of Midrash to explain the objection to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, rain can come because of one person. If one person prays and is worthy, rain will come. But for sustenance to come, economic well-being for the community, it only comes for the sake of a community. But here we got an example. What are you talking about? Al ma'ashkechan parnasah b'shvil yachid. Just Moses alone his prayers provided sustenance for the entire community. Okay, so the answer is kevan de l'rabim hu ba'e kirabim dami. Moses is a little bit different. Because now here the translation is, since he requested manna for the many, therefore he was considered like many, not just as an individual. I think also it's that Moses was a unique individual. He represented the people. He was the leader and represented all of them. And so when he asked for things, he always asked for the community's sake. And therefore he himself was seen as the community, as it were. Okay, now we have another story about the danger of being rude to your teacher. Rav Huna bar Manoach v'Rav Shmuel bar Idi v'Rav Chia mivastanaya havu shchiche kamay derava. So these three scholars, Rav Huna, Rav Shmuel, Rav Chia, would study with Rava. They were his main students. But then Rava dies. Ki nach nafshei de Rava atu lekamei de Rav Papa. So they came before Rav Papa to be their new mentor. Kol emeta hava amar lehu shmata velo hava nistabra lehu. But it didn't work out. Every time you'd say a halacha that it didn't sound reasonable to them, they would, talk amongst themselves, or maybe it says here they make a gesture to each other. Maybe it was like talking behind his back, and it really hurt Rav Papa. Chalash da'ateh. That was the exact same language as we saw in the story about Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Chalash da'ateh is his intellect was weakened, was hurt. He was offended by this. It hurt him deeply. And then he had a dream with the same verse about the 3 shepherds dying in one time, or leaving. I cut off 3 shepherds in 1 month. Lemachar hihavu niftaru mine amar lahu lizlei Rabbanan bishlama. Now this is a really interesting. Curious how you read this translation here. So the next day, when they took leave of him, Rav Papa said to them, "May the rabbis go in peace." Now he explains. He says, Steinsaltz, a hint that this would be their final party. Rav Papa thought that the 3 sages would die as punishment for their behavior, and he would never see them again. Now, he's got the notes here that there's 2 ways of saying "go in peace." If you say "lech l'shalom," let's see if I get this right. Good. Right, "lech l'shalom" with a lamed. That's what you say at a funeral. You say to the dead person, "Lech l'shalom," go to peace. But wait, did I get this right? No. When you say, sorry, backwards. When you say when you leave somebody, you say "Lech l'shalom," go to peace, right? So you're parting from a friend, "Lech l'shalom." Before a dead person, you say "Lech b'shalom," go in peace. When he says here, you're right. He says "Lezlu Rabbanan b'shalom." It sounds like he's saying to them that go in peace, like they're dead men walking. Now, then there's a variant reading that says the opposite. But I just think it's interesting here. Or what do you make of this? Is this that he is? Remember, Rav Papa is the offended one. So is he kind of just stating reality, like, wow, what a bummer, these guys are going to die? Or did he say this intentionally? Because he's really angry at them. And this is what, when rabbis are offended, they take it out on the people they're offended with. What do you say?
Since they were still his students, would it have been appropriate to call them rabbis at that point?
Yeah, because they were still rabbis. I mean, these were top-notch students.
All right.
So they were rabbis in their own right and studying with the leader of a more senior rabbi.
Okay, because I read it as sort of if someone's still a medical student and they haven't finished yet, you're like, by doctor, as like a subtle, or just call them Mr. as a subtle reference to the fact that they're not doctors yet or something. That's sort of like professional. I read it as more of like a professional slur sort of thing,
okay.
Like a dig at the fact that they're not there yet, But I guess I was wrong about that.
Yeah, because he's still referring to them as Rabbanan, right? Lezlu Rabbanan Bishlama. But I just think it's it. And based on the next story, that's why I suggested that maybe it's Rav Papa kind of being a nasty. Because look at this next story. Rav Shimi bar Ashi Hava Shiche Kamei de Rav Papa. So this Rabbi Shimi bar, there's a different rabbi, was a student of Rav Papa. And Hava Makshe Le Tuvi, he'd ask a lot of questions or objections in this case, questioning Rav Papa's opinion. Yom Echad Chazye de Nefal al Apeh. One day, so Rav Shimi saw his rabbi, his teacher Rav Papa, fall on his face, and he heard him say, Rachmana litzlan mikisufa de Shimi. Save me from the embarrassment of Shimi. Kabel alei shtikuta v'tulo akshele. Rav Shimi was then resolved to be silent and not to raise any further objections. Now, the note here says he saw how he had hurt his rabbi and he didn't want to hurt him anymore. So he learned from this experience not to ask questions. But I'm just wondering if he was terrified because he heard what happened to the other three guys and he said, I'm not going to ask any more questions. I think I'll just be quiet in class now. You can read it in different ways.
That defeats the purpose of Torah study. You're supposed to think and argue and match minds to come to some greater understanding. So I'm not at all impressed with these rabbis.
Well, that's the thing. So the question is, should we take the more positive, the more upbeat, the more understanding approach that, as Steinsaltz has kind of suggested, that in the case of Rav Papa with the three other scholars, he was saying this, either he was saying it kind of with regret, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry they're going to die, or the variant reading, which is, he said, go to peace, not in peace, because he was trying to protect them. So that's a positive look at Rav Papa. And in this case, Rav Shimi, this is a positive approach to say he didn't want to hurt his teacher. He realized that, because sometimes it is, I remember I was in a class, when I was in Israel, I was in a class at the place I studied, Pardes, and the head of one of the rabbis was teaching us a class, a contemporary class on the Holocaust. And there was one student who had, studied the Holocaust, and the rabbi who was teaching the Holocaust studies was really not doing a history class. He was teaching a kind of a meta class, trying to understand the meaning of the Holocaust and the meaning of whatever text we were looking at. And the one student kept pumping away questions, which clearly questioned the rabbi's knowledge of the historical accuracy of some of the things he was teaching. And finally, the rabbi just said, look, this is not a history class. I'm trying to teach something else. And it was clear that the student was just kind of trying to show off that he knew so much. And it had hurt this rabbi who was trying to teach something you don't get it. I'm trying to teach one thing, you're questioning me on a different matter. And it was embarrassing to the rabbi. And here I think you have this Shimi who realized, wow, my questions are not being helpful, they're actually being hurtful. And he, out of his humility, learned to ask fewer questions so he wouldn't insult or embarrass his teacher. That's one way of looking at it. I just wonder that, I think the rabbis sometimes are very critical of themselves and want to point out that these rabbis can become very arrogant and can be dangerous in that way. But there's different ways of reading it. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm reading it from my own history. I studied Jewish studies at Brandeis. Then I was at HUC Rabbinical School. I was at JTS Rabbinical School. And all of these institutions, I'll tell you that the least helpful scholars were the scholars that I studied with in Jewish studies. When I was at Brandeis, the history professors were great. The the Judaic scholars had no interest in their students at all. And so maybe I'm coloring it from my own background. And same thing in rabbinical school. If you were a favorite of theirs, they loved you. If you weren't, they could care less. And if you asked too many questions, they were irritated with you. So my own issues coming out. But I do think that these stories are fascinating. You can read them in so many different ways because they're so terse, right? The stories, again, remember in his translation, the bold is the actual text. The plain print is Steinsaltz filling in. sometimes it's helpful, but sometimes he's adding his own opinion. So, okay, well, we didn't really finish the whole piece here. Oh, let's just get the last one here. This last story, because we're talking about whether a person gets, whether rain will come for the benefit of one person. And here we have a story of Rabbi Daniel Bar Katina, who had really a great system of watering his stuff. He would look out at the garden and inspect what needed to be watered. And then he would say, you know, this area needs to be watered. He'd pray for rain, and it would water just that section. So if you are good enough, you can get rain to hit just what you need. So that's a good thing to remember when you're doing your gardening and praying. Focus on what part of the garden needs rain. And if you get to the status of Rav Daniel Bar Katina, you won't have to put in an irrigation system.
I did react reading this.
Yeah.
Why doesn't it relate somebody saying, "Oh, come on, Daniel"?
Right. No. This is, you know, but it proves the point that Rabbi Yochanan was making, that for a single person, you know, God will send rain. And then this one also, this teaching, I guess because of that cartoon, I think it was Little Abner, right? The guy who, I forgot what his name, he has the cloud over his head. But here's the positive thing. This is a good thing. It's not a thundercloud like a negative. Here that Rabbi Yossi Bar Rabbi Chanina said, every righteous person prepares a separate thundercloud for you so that the rain comes when you need it. Wait, let's get to one more. This was great too. And this was really fast because there was tension between the communities, the Babylonians and the Palestinians. I love this one. Ula Ikla Levavel. Ula would come to Babel. We'd go back and forth. He was centered in Palestine, but he would go to Babylonia because there were scholars in both areas. And he saw flying clouds, these thinner clouds. And he said to the local residents, "Put away your vessels. The rain is coming." Ultimately, despite the presence of flying clouds, rain did not fall. And he said, just as Babylonians are liars, so too their rain is liars. In Israel, it's a reliable sign of rain, not in Babylonia. And then we have these, I like the second half of the story. Another time he comes to Babylonia and he saw a basket full of dates on sale for a dinar. It was so cheap. He said, you can buy a basket full of honey dates for a dinar, and yet these Babylonians don't study. You know, he's putting them down for their Torah scholarship. Right? They don't spend as much time as we do in Israel as to study Torah. You can get food so easily, but of course he eats the dates and he gets sick. And then he says, "Oh, you know what? I was wrong." I like the fact that he can correct himself. A basket full of knives for a dinar. You know, I got sick from this basket of dates for just a dinar, and yet somehow the Babylonians are still able to study Torah. So you know what? I was wrong about them. They're pretty impressive that they can eat this food that makes them sick, and that they still study Torah. But I point that out just because there was this tension between who takes the lead in the Jewish world. Is it the Palestinians because that's the land of Israel? Or is it Babylonia because that's where the majority of the community had moved to and was the richer, the wealthier community at this time? But here it's played out in this statement by Ula, where he's making fun of Babylonians. And yet the Babylonian Talmud still was willing to put it in their text. So they still added this story in. Okay. So any other comments? We'll get to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. And Ezekiel, I'll write my friend Jeff Rubenstein and see what he suggests about that. See if he gives me an answer. Anyway, any other comments or questions?
Well, the story about the dates, the guy clearly overindulged. So I don't know what, it was his fault. He didn't feel well.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And no, it's a good comeuppance story, right?
Yeah.
You go pompous, and then he gets sick, and then he realizes, you know what? I got to give credit to these people. They study Torah, and even though they eat things that can cause them to have stomach problems. But yeah, it was very appropriate that he got hoisted by his own petard. Okay. All right. So we'll keep working at it. I'll send you the notes for 10 this week, and we'll keep going. All right. Very
Have
good.
a good afternoon, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Take care.
Oh, Rabbi,
Yeah.
Before you go, I talked to Judy about it before you got here. The Dafyomi group that I'm on, they're looking for female Talmudic learners for a project about women, stories and drash about women in the Talmud. If I send you the link, can you forward it to everybody else? I got Judy's email, and then you can forward it on to any other women who are here that might want to participate.
Sure. That sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.
You too.